Coming to you from a portable microphone, this is Don't Get Me Started. This is a conversation about advertising. And here is your host, freelance creative director and creative circus department head, Dan Balser.
Yes, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. And I'm finding as I edit these that I tend to start off saying similar things like, I'm really excited about this. This is really cool for me. But I always mean it. I'm not just blowing hot air, and I'm not full of shit when I say that I'm excited when I start to have these conversations. The last episode, admittedly, really under the weather. I think I was suffering the whole weekend. And I also find this, folks, maybe this happens to you. Sometimes when you are not feeling well, you have lower expectations and a higher success rate. Sometimes when you're exhausted, you don't try as hard, and the process takes over, and you actually end up with better stuff. I'm not advocating sleep deprivation or voluntary illness acquisition, but I am saying that, like, don't expect that just because you're wiped out or sad or sick, that your creative bone isn't firing on all cylinders. So trust the fact that the process sometimes has its own desire, and sometimes I'm also not saying last episode was good. I'm not coming in here saying, you know what, even though I'm sick, I'm still fucking good at this shit. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying sometimes when I record these, I feel like it was a terrible conversation. Those are usually Andy Corbett episodes, and then I go back and listen to them, and they don't suck as much as I thought they did. So don't be so hard on yourself. Don't worry about it when you're sick. Don't phone it in when you're sick, because you might surprise yourself. Because you know what else is possibly happening, Don? Possibly what's happening is that you're tapping into some part of your mind that you wouldn't have felt if you were basically what you feel like is 100%. So if you're basically, I'm ready, let's do this, you might walk right past something you would have seen if you were under the weather.
You're handicapping yourself.
When you're healthy, you're handicapping.
Yeah.
Or when you're sick, you're voluntarily shunting something or shutting something down. I don't know.
I like this theory.
I don't know.
This is good.
This is a thought. So I am excited about this because this is Don Shelford's third visit to the audio recorder. I think we probably had 3 different technologies recording these podcasts over the time, because the first time was in 2008, and it was the very beginning of the second year of the podcast, when Don was kind of taking a slight, you know what it is? It's an access road. So like when you're on the highway, you're still going the same direction, but you pull off, and there's like sort of this access road that takes you off, but takes you right back on. There's another ramp. Mm-hmm. So it's not a diversion.
Not a service entrance.
It's not a service. It's not like...
Service road.
It's not a service. It's not a service road. It's an alternate route as a director, which I think is a really interesting thing that his experience has done, and I want to talk a little bit about that. And then in 2012, he was back as an art director. I don't know exactly what your title was when you were at Wieden & Kennedy, but you're at Wieden & Kennedy. That was a good solid 5+ years ago.
Yeah.
Now, as a group creative director at Droga5, Don's in sort of a sweet spot as far as I'm concerned. And I'm just going to riff just for 2 seconds about the man that we're going to hear from here. As I watched Don talk today, and as my sort of mind associates meeting with him today to record, I think of someone who's a pure creative. There's certain people I think who can jerry-rig a career, people who look at the career and say, that looks really fun, let me try that. Then there's people who are kind of in their element and were maybe made to do something like this. Don's always struck me as a pure creative, and not just a guy with talent, but a guy who understands how to leverage the people around him in a really cool, collaborative way. A visionary storyteller who's funny and smart. And I think funny and smart go hand in hand, but this isn't someone who's just an artist to tell stories. This is an artist who really can elaborate, elevate, and enhance brands, which is really, really, really cool. And I think Droga5 is very lucky to have Don Shelford, and he's just like one of the coolest people ever. So
I'll take those compliments any day.
Yeah,
Thank you so
much. Well, you earn them. And I think anyone who knows you, anyone listening to this, who I know there's people out there right now who are nodding because they've had associations with you. But welcome back to school, and it's really great to see you again.
Yeah, it's so great to be here. It's been a couple of years, and even though I've been to Atlanta a bunch lately with some clients like MailChimp and stuff, I haven't had a moment to get in here. So it's good to have some time just dedicated to you guys and coming and seeing everybody.
Yeah, it's cool, but you had to work this morning, right?
Yeah, I did. I thought I'd have the whole day off, but they found me. Some fire drills going on.
Ugh, that's terrible. So I do want to run a little bit through, so people that might not know who you are, you should start off by going to donshelford.com and look at the work. the work that you might have seen is the launch of the Volkswagen Beetle when he was at Arnold. Before he was at Arnold, he was actually a captain of a sailboat. Arnold, he was a year at Goodby Silverstein and Partners. These years here, 2004 to 2007, creative director, was that a freelance?
That was, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think, where are you? I
NB
was like, after Goodby, I was in Amsterdam, Wyden, Amsterdam.
Okay, Wyden, Amsterdam.
Yeah, after Goodby.
And director at HSI, and then some commercial director and all sorts of projects, some music videos, creative director at Wyden Kennedy, and now, like I said, at Droga5. I don't know if I necessarily have like an interview questions for you, but I do want to talk a little bit about your sort of mindset about the career. So when you look at the career in retro, and I've said this many times, a career is only linear in retrospect, right? You only look at a career and say, oh, this is what you did, and this is how it worked. Are you often looking for something else? What would take you into doing directing? Was it just something fun? Did you need a creative reset? And is there, in your mind, sort of a grand plan of a goal or sort of what the career you want it to look like?
I think, directing, I was super interested because I was just doing a lot of TV production. And then at the time, there were so many music videos that were incredible. So it was, I think Spike Jonze was kind of, I felt like once a month was putting an amazing music video out, and Michelle Gondry and all those guys, and Chris Cunningham. It was just kind of this golden.
I don't know these names. Are these music video
music
directors?
Yeah, okay. They are. So and they were just doing some of the most incredibly refreshing stuff you've ever seen, and it was just super inspiring. I'm like, oh god, how do I get into this? And we were working with directors, or I was working with directors that were also shooting music videos on the side. And it was, I think, still a time where you could get paid to do it, right? Where people were paying over $1 million to shoot a music video, or, in a budget.
Right. That's full production. That's not that the director makes.
Yeah, full production. But it seemed like it was like, wow, this is great. I loved it. And it seemed again like a parallel universe. Like you're still concepting. There's still a client. There's an idea. There's a storyline. And so I kind of took the plunge and kind of jumped into it to give it a whirl. And I did it with a bit of a safety blanket. I had a partner named John Connect who was a writer and we did it together because I think in advertising you're always more comfortable working in teams. Right. It just kind of feels better. But we went into it. It didn't seem that scary because it was just it was really the same process and the same job and the same kind of using the same part of your brain that you do every day in advertising. That's
cool. When you were doing that, was there ever a point where you're like, I kind of want to get back into advertising? I kind of want to get back into solving client problems, or was it like, did it seem? And I'm just trying to imagine what that feeling would be like. Is it like because it's more of a pure artistic expression, a little bit less problem solving? I'm sure the problems are different. I'm sure the problems are more dealing with egos or dealing with record labels and managers and all that kind of stuff. But did it seem? Was there a moment where you're like, I want to get back into the business, or was the business sort of sucking you back in at some point?
I think even make sense? I did. Yeah, it totally does. I mean, we were directing commercials as well, and that was a really tricky switch because you're going to production side. You have creative teams. You're seeing yourself walk towards you with script changes and things like that, and you're on set, and you're playing a different role. And I think there was a bit of restraint of trying to keep yourself from trying to
be a creative director,
and it's just like that's not your job anymore. And also the drama that happens behind on the other side of the set with their clients and everything like that, and you're trying to not get wrapped up in that, get your head kind of in that area. Right. So it was a really it was interesting. And then I think what happened is we ended up getting hired for a lot of stuff that was like direct to client, like, hey, can you write this and direct it? And that was kind of a nice area to be in.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Were there ever times as a commercial director when the creative team or the agency really did want more creative feedback, maybe even some art direction concepts for how you block a scene or how you shoot a scene from an angle or whatever? How much control? And I guess the question is, let's back this question up, rephrase it for someone who's maybe a junior getting in the business, starting to do television, because the questions come up, I think, once or twice in class about what is the creative team's role on a TV shoot? Where is the line drawn between an art director and a director as far as how a shot is assembled, how the set's assembled and blocked, and what the shots are going to be. Shot list.
Yeah.
Okay, so am I shooting this main character from a low camera? Am I shooting it from a high camera?
Right.
Those kind of decisions, were there agencies? So talk a little bit about how that changes on either side of that table, and or what should an art director assume their role is, and what are they ceding a little bit to the director?
Yeah, I think, well, when I first started directing, and doing a scene that was, say, a complicated dialogue scene with 3 or 4 people, it's pretty complicated blocking, and it just there's a technical side of it of like, what's the sequence of these shots and how do you make this edit make sense? I had to learn that. It wasn't. I thought I knew more than I did when I got in there, and then I literally was buying books and having to go through. And then luckily there was some directors who've been doing it for a while that I could call up and ask. Because
all you were doing as an art director is saying, wait a second, fix his collar.
Right. Can you say that line again?
Right.
And then you're not really thinking so much about the shots and what shots you'll need and what
assets you're going to have when you get to edit.
Yeah, exactly. And the intention of the camera, if like you said, if you shoot it from a low angle, it's a different intention of shooting from a high angle, and
like versus weakness, all these kind of things.
Yeah, and just like what the language of the camera was not something I was as familiar with as the language of like written on paper. Dialogue is very different. So, and I think to a certain point you can get away with it in very simple kind of like 2-person comedy dialogue setups. There's a lot of leeway, I think. Right. But as you do stuff that's a little bit more dramatic, or it gets a little bit. I had more to learn, and so it was. I had some frightening moments on set for sure, where I was just like, I don't know if this is gonna, is this gonna cut together?
I can't imagine that. I would imagine that happens on every single set. If I had to direct anything, I would be scared shitless constantly because I get uptight about it. But what makes the best? As a director, and you're already nervous thinking about it. Like you're kind of...
I know, I'm shaking. I'm like
you're sweating about...
Yeah,
you're good, man. Everything's under control. No, but what... Okay, so let's give a simpler question. If you're a director and you're working on a project, what's a director's expectation of that art director's role? Like, what do you want from the art director?
I think the amazing thing about, a film set for advertising is you generally have a pretty good budget. You're hiring incredibly talented people. I think some of the stuff we looked at today, there was probably... three or four different Oscar winners that shot spots or edited spots. Yeah. It's kind of, we're so lucky, like the talent that we can use. And they're super collaborative for the most part, but there is a point where you have to say, I hired you. I don't know this part of the job. I'm going to let you do this because you are the best in the world at doing this. And I like, as a general rule, I think it's collaborating early, the creatives and the production crew, director, editor, special effects team, getting as much conversation, even when there's nothing to talk about. I still have calls with them just to, there's always something that comes up, because the last thing you want is on the set for there to be any kind of disagreement. And then suddenly 100 people are stopping work, waiting for you to sort out if this guy should be wearing a red sweater or a off red sweater.
But that holds true for client relationships too, right?
Yeah.
Getting everybody involved together and everybody feeling like that they have ownership over the problem or the project. Yeah,
and I think when you get on a set, this is kind of like, this is where you want the director, the DP, on the production crew to do what they're best at. And just you're obviously watching every shot. You can have input, but there shouldn't be any big decisions being made that you hadn't talked about.
Right.
So
Interesting. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your career. So started off in the Caribbean as a boat guy, Arnold. And then there was this period going to Mexico, Guatemala. And I think that, all right, this is going to sound ass kissy. I'm very inspired by your whole entire sort of attitude and outlook, because I feel like you probably aren't aware, or maybe you are, that it seems to me, looking at your career, there's an internal like barometer or something. It's like, okay, I need to depressurize, or I need to readjust to re-inspire. And is that something that you are aware of? Is that default? This goes back to the very first question. But I wonder if there's something psychological about it, because yes, I understand that like you're working with directors. That sounds fun. I can do that. That sounds kind of cool. But it is, to many, in a lot of ways, kind of a departure. There's kind of a risk involved. But it's a calculated, intelligent risk. And I'm saying that because You're scratching your chin as if that you don't understand
No, I get it.
Where we're going.
I think I know the answer.
All right, go ahead.
No, I think there isn't it. And I wish I was as cognizant or of the moment to be like, now is exactly the time when I need to make a decision that's going to make my life turn a different direction. I do kind of. I guess I've always been able to feel like when it's time to leave or when it's time for a change or when it's time to get out, and it's always what do I need to do to keep myself inspired? And sometimes it's take a break. Sometimes it's find a new job, or sometimes it's find a job that's sort of, like directing was the same but different. It seemed inspiring.
Have you ever had issues with self-confidence? Or do you feel like this is something I can do pretty much consistently? This is something I can do? Or is it like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, it's kind of more advertising is incredibly forgiving as a profession. Because it's like, I've never taken or done a shift or done, tacked away or done something different and come back to look for a job again in advertising, and people go, why is there a hole in your resume?
Right.
It just doesn't happen. People admire the fact that you tried something new.
Very good point.
Yeah, it's just like, and you could, and I don't think enough people do it because I think it just makes you a better creative. If you went off like, hey, I'm going to try to make a movie, or I'm going to try to write a book. I'm going to paint for a couple months.
But the thing that you said differently, I think a lot of people is, I'm going to try to make a movie. And I think that that's inspiring because this is going to sound stupid, but it's because you don't have an expectation that like you have to do it perfectly.
Yeah.
And that's a no-brainer for you. Like, obviously that's how you feel, but I don't think a lot of people I think a lot of people are scared of fucking it up or scared of that blank spot on the resume. And right now, as we're talking, I've got sort of listeners in my ear, I'm thinking about how people are looking at, well, of course he did it. He's fucking badass. He can go do that. It's like, yeah, but he just tried this thing. And that's why I find it inspiring. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just got a text from my dear friend, Rick Williams, who graduated from Circus, 12 years ago or something, 10. He's had the same job for 10 years and he's so happy.
Yeah.
And he's inspired by the projects he works on in his life. So, there's no template that says you have to do these things or whatever. So, I don't know. Yeah,
like looking back at directing, like I don't think I was a very good commercial director.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm fine like admitting that.
Yeah, you did it for a year, right? So like, if you did it for a decade, you may have been pretty good.
Music videos I loved. I think that was great. Commercial director was hard, and I came out of that, and now I go into every job. It's just like with massive respect for the people that have been doing it for a while.
Man. Yeah.
Holy cow! It's such an amazingly hard job and career, and but I think that it was fine. I came back and it was like I got a better job for trying it. When I went back to Wyden in Portland, and they're like, "This is great." Hey, there's some projects and there were some projects there like, we don't have the budget to shoot something, but could you shoot it? And it was great, and it helped me. It still helps me every time I go on a set now. I just know more.
That's
cool.
Just,
So
we may not use this. I don't know. I want to name drop. I want to hear the most amazing people that you've gotten to collaborate with. Off the top of your head, who's the number one coolest person that you've met or got to work with?
Oh God. Okay. There's so many. It has to be Jeff Lynne from ELO.
That's the right answer. That's the right answer.
Yeah.
Jeff Lynne from Electric Light Orchestra.
Yeah.
One of my all-time heroes, music heroes, like inspiration. It's amazing.
It was one of the coolest experiences.
So did you guys have the music for the spot first, or how did that come to... And this is for Volkswagen commercial of a guy who... I love the way you set this up too. So there's a commercial of a guy who goes to... You want to describe the spot and talk about how it was sort of art?
Yeah, it was for the launch of the Volkswagen Beetle, and it was about it was for the Beetle convertible, and so the story was about this guy who's got this job, and it's an indoor job. He works in a mall, or he walks through a mall. His company's inside an office building. He never goes outside. It's called Bubble Boy, and he eventually sees the car from outside his glass window, and he presses up against it, and he sees like the outdoors that he will never.
And it's a great spot because it's like jump cut spots of him riding the same elevator in a different shirt over and over again, and walking down the same hall and making the same cup of coffee over and over again. Set to Mr. Blue Sky by Electric Light Orchestra.
Yeah.
So was the music part of the concept?
Yeah, it was. We sold it with that, or we pitched it with that track,
and recut it with Jeff.
And then I think what happened was he didn't. He's like I think it was a money thing too. If he re-recorded it, he then owns the master, so he gets to keep more of the profit, and we get a better deal on it. So he's like, I can just remake it. So that's amazing. He's like, well, do you want to come over to my house?
Did he use any existing tracks from that?
No, he's incredible. So he's like 80% or 90% of the instruments and vocals on every track for ELO. He does all of it. And at the time he was working on George Harrison's last album, and he had that on the board, so he let us listen to that. But we hung out in his living room for like 2 or 3 days.
It's amazing.
And it was incredible. And he just kind of tried, and people were calling up like Paul McCartney and
he's taking calls from Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And Tom Petty.
And Tom Petty, who wanted to come over and play ping pong.
Right.
It was crazy.
Me at all.
But he was the sweetest guy ever. And of course, he would play you. He's like, what do you think of this? And like, sounds pretty good, Jeff. What do you say? Like, no, I don't like it.
Right. That's another thing I tell students is like, you a year from now, you're going to be sitting on set and someone's going to look at you and say, was that good? It's like, Jeff Lynne's looking at you, asking it. His music sounded
just
good.
Like, are you kidding me?
That's crazy. So just so it doesn't look like everything's awesome, and you may not feel comfortable asking this question, but what was like the worst professional day you've had so far in your career? And you don't have to name agencies or clients, but what's something that just like made you just say, fuck this? Or does that never happen to you?
No, it happens constantly. And I was trying to make a little bit of a point about that, like today. Because even basically, like, it's going to happen. There's going to be horrible jobs, and there's going to be horrible. And I think when I was working in Amsterdam, there was a client that I went to work on, which I won't name, but everyone's like, "Do not take this job. Do not work on this client. They're a nightmare." And I was, eager enough to say, like, I'm going to be the person that changes that client.
It was bad for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't worked on it.
And people are like, "No, seriously, don't do it."
Plus, based on my life, nothing's ever been that bad. How bad could it be?
And they were truly awful humans. Like, they would stand a foot away from your face and scream and be spitting in your face. Horrible, horrible humans. And luckily, none of them have gone on to bigger and better things.
God.
Karma is coming back to some of them.
Oh, it's real, dude.
And
it's real.
But it was horrible, and I was just miserable. And calling all hours, and they're just like yeah, they were just awful people. And, just trying to like, and then we had some shoots that were just horrendous. They were just runaway shoots. They just wouldn't end, and they kept throwing, changing things and like putting celebrities in it that you had to figure out what to do with, and it was just they were a disaster. But yeah, they were tough, and I had them for almost a year.
So how did you go to work? Like, what made you like? How did you get through it? And like,
I think I can usually go a couple months of just like, there's got to be a way, there's got to be a way, there's got to be a way. And then eventually, it was kind of comedy. Dan Wyden ended up firing them as a client because so many people were miserable. And yeah, so he basically said, if I don't fire them, everyone's going to quit anyway.
Right.
So, but we're going to have to lay some people off. So it's sort of like his logic was, I'd rather lay them off for the right reasons than have them quit and hate my company forever. So it's pretty honorable, but there's no great outcome to it.
No. Terrible.
But luckily we got some new business on the back of it and nobody had to go. But I think we fired them, but they tried to fire us before, and it was this whole thing.
Break up with me, I'm breaking up with you.
I'm breaking up with you. It was so, yeah, but it was, yeah, no, I've had some pretty rough ones for sure. Some that I signed up for and some that have just turned out in not a great way.
And like, how do you deal with it that day? Like, what do you do when you get home? Because like, it would ruin it. I haven't told this story maybe in years, but like, there was this poster behind my desk at my office in Ogilvy. That was back in the day when you had like actual offices with doors. So right behind my desk, low on the wall, was an REM poster. The bottom of it was like lined up with the floorboard, so it was oddly placed. Like, why is there a poster there?
Yeah.
Because if you peeled it up, you saw that I kicked my foot straight through the wall to Rob Jacobson's office. And I just couldn't deal with it. I couldn't deal with those kind of moments. I had a hard time finding the light through that tunnel. Like, Did you go home and work on a project? Did you go out? I mean,
yeah, I had some side projects, but I think I kind of did what, I'm like, okay, well, there was one particular shoot that was the worst shoot I've ever been on. I value it because nothing could ever be worse than it still.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, it's at a baseline for the worst ever for me. So nothing's ever, luckily, has been as bad as that, which is valuable. But as the shoot deteriorated and things went from bad to worse, I hired a director that I loved, so we could commiserate at least. I had creatives that I worked well with. You kind of have these little wins along the way, and then eventually I'll like, okay, what could we make from this? Now we have the story's a disaster. Could we make something else out of it? You're constantly trying to like.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I remember my very, very first job as an account guy, the account supervisor I worked for, whom I'm still just amazing friends with to this day because she's amazing. We would debrief. I'm doing this in air quotes after every bad meeting because we would just laugh about like the stuff you couldn't believe you hear people saying, and like to have that sort of commiserating moment is a really cathartic thing. Yeah,
and it's just like I still got to meet and work with this director that Melody McDaniel was the director. Amazing, and I still work with her, and we've done jobs together and worked. It's like it was a great trip. And I think, but there was one point. I think there was one point when we knew all was lost in this production, and it was just like it's so far gone. And we all kind of everybody in the crew had this moment of realization that this is just like there's just no saving any of this. And we just went out for this like the most expensive. Ridiculous meal because it was like our final revenge. We knew we could expense this to them.
The silver lining is made of sushi.
Exactly. And we just got really drunk and just ate a ton of food and just like racked up the biggest bill we could and just sent it to them. Yeah, that was all we had left.
Yeah, that's all you got sometimes.
Yeah.
So in Forum, Zach Delange, who's the way you were looking is off to the left, asked a question about the transition to creative director from art director. And and I go back to talking about you as if you're not sitting here, but about like there's certain people who promoted and certain people who are made to be creative directors and certain people who should never be more than what they are, whatever. I'm just curious to know whether you started off this industry thinking you wanted to run business or run an agency, or is the craft and the art critical to you? And can you have it all? Like, sort of, what's your mindset about the career perspective now as a group creative director?
I wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't. It sounds like idealistic, but I was never like driven by like I want to be running an agency one day. There is good sides to that, to being a boss, because you get to make the buck stops with you, and you get to make things better, hopefully, and have a final decision. Yeah, and I think it's like being a director in film too. It was the same kind of thing. I think there was some appeal to it because it's like you get the final decision, and it's frightening, but it's also kind of like you have more control of your creative process, which what you always want as a creative. Like, so the higher up you go, the more control you have of your thing that you're making.
Yeah, but you don't get to make it all though.
Yeah, it's true.
Is that? I mean, do you not notice? I mean, is that not critical?
I don't know. It's like I feel like. I'm a pretty involved creative director but I'm not like an over the shoulder kind of writing scripts kind of guy. I just think it's like you're doing it but faster, always. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got a new question that I think I've started asking people after the last time you were here. So what personal trait of yours, what is it about Don Shelford specifically that you think has been valuable to your career so far?
I think the most valuable thing is just being able to be just be fluid with my job and being able to jump into different mediums, and more seamlessly, I think. Because I think the job of an art director has definitely changed over the years, and it will continue to change, and the job of writer will continue to change. But I think I always have to remind myself of just how many things we're exposed to in our job, and how many other creatives, from photographers and illustrators and directors and costume designers and musicians, and it's and like you can deep dive into any one of those and pop back up and be the better person for it and the better creative person for it. And I have so much fun doing that, and I think that's why I've been able to do this for 20 years, is because I allow myself to go on these kind of little tangents.
It's really cool. Is it curiosity? Is it like experimental? Is it love of art? Is it about your wanting to find another way to express things as an artist? I wonder.
Yeah, I think it's a it's a bit of both, and I think there's a conscious. I'm very conscious that like I can get exposed to the best people ever who do this. Like an Oscar-winning editor, I can sit in a room with him for 2 weeks. It's amazing.
Yeah,
like nobody
really,
gets to do that.
Really cool.
Or like Jeff Lynne, and
right, advertising is such a cheat.
It's crazy. We have access to so much stuff, and it's easy to kind of be myopic about your whatever you're working on, and like just. But like you have these opportunities to be truly collaborative and with amazing people, rather than just kind of I don't know, doing your normal job.
Yeah. So as a student, were you answered the question about what should we be thinking of as students that you wish you had done when you were a student? As a student, were you chasing quantity? Because that was your advice, which I thought was great advice. Were you just going for just churning at bats and more and more and more? I remember when I was in school, the setup was a little different when I was there.
Yeah.
We had always had at least 3 teams classes going all the time. So
Yeah.
I was always working on project, constantly quantity. Is that your recollection? Is that still your sort of mode? I guess it changes when you get older. You're a little bit more efficient.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when I first started out, I knew the day I walked into my very first job at Arnold that like I was not as good as 99% of the people there, because I was just starting out, and it wasn't like, hey, I'm going to get there. But I didn't put, there were people that put in thousands more hours than I did at that job. So I knew I had to work more hours to catch up and just do more. And it was my creative director's job to sift through my craziness and say, there's an idea in this one. There's an idea in this one. Like my idea, or I guess I knew my role was not to edit myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really great.
So I just made stuff. And I mean, there's a responsibility in making, you're not just going to make trash. But it's
no,
just
I know what you mean. It's like, I know what you mean. Don't leave that there because it's not fully fleshed out or that you think it's embarrassing. It's like, that could be something. That could be something.
And that's what creative directors are for. You told me not to tap on the table. I'm tapping now.
No, you're good. You're good.
But I mean, that's your job as a creative director, is to see things in ideas and try to like shine a light on it and try to get it out of people and try to tell them this is where you should be heading. This is the brilliance. But yeah, like there's. So I would just. It was just a quantity thing, and I remember like bringing my creative director into my like little office, and I would have like literally hundreds of things on the walls, and he was just like, "This is awesome," It's just like it was fun for him.
Love that.
It's fun for me, but I mean, there is some like, and I think the fear people don't do it because they're like, he's going to think or she's going to think I'm stupid because I put that thing up the wall, or I put that over there, and like that idea is dumb. Like, well, who cares? It's like no one's going to die. No one's going to get killed.
What I think they think is that I found something good and I'm done now. That's the part that I think is more common. I think that's more deadly. But that led me to another question I was going to ask you before you even said that, which is who's been the best creative director for that you've ever worked with, and what about it that made it that way? It's a tough question. You're
Then what? Like the best creative director I had that could sift through my stuff. Or
and could creatively direct and find something smart to help you develop. Like really kind of like got into the work.
I've had like a lot. I've been really lucky. I've had a lot of really good ones, but like most memorably, I think when I was younger, it mattered the most. This guy Ron Lawner, he was the chief creative officer of Arnold, which was my first job on Volkswagen, and he was just like giving me more time than any ECD should have ever given me. That's and cool. To all his creatives, and he was also I remember very vividly, he just the trust he had. Like there was one thing I was arguing him over. I think it was a Backpage New Yorker, which was a cool placement. And it was for Volkswagen. It was like this thing that I thought like, oh, I want to illustrate it. And he's like, I think you should shoot it. I think it should be photography. And I'm like, no, I think it should be illustrated. And I was like, we were going back and forth. And I was like, I didn't know any better. Like, and eventually he's like, all right, if that's what you want to do, go for it. And show it to me when you're done, and we can talk about how it turned out.
How did it turn out? It
wasn't in a condescending way.
No. How did it turn out?
It was cool. Like it was good.
I try really hard as a teacher to say, I'm pretty sure I know how this should be, but if you're going to tell me twice or 3 times that you want to do it that way, it's going to be so much better your way.
Yeah.
Because you see it.
Yeah.
It's yours. So even though photography literally takes you a certain place, because photography implies either a photographic illustration or a literal documentation of something. Right. So conceptually, illustration already tells you that it's imaginary. Mm-hmm. That's what you wanted. And that's cool that he didn't ram it.
He easily could have been like, hey man, I'm the ECD.
Right.
I don't have time for this shit. Like, just go shoot it. Go find a photographer.
This campaign was one of the best car campaigns ever made. If you haven't seen it, it's this campaign when they launched. I'm talking to listeners now. The Beetle in the U.S., maybe in the world, I don't know. And it was a picture of this crazy scene, like cars jumping over, or this beautiful model at some shoot. And in the background, not even in complete focus often, you'd have a Beetle going by, and underneath it, the line would say, like, hey, look, there's a yellow one.
Right.
Like, there's a green one. Yeah. Which is so cool because it was such an iconic car. It was so true about our experience when we saw one. And the creative was like, I almost call it like interactive print, because it was a story that your eye moved perfectly into the page. So it was really, really cool work.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was super fun. But Ron was great. And then he's like, oh, it's okay to let me fail sometimes, like,
that's really great.
Let your people fail. And I think widen that's on their wall, fail harder. Yeah. And Droga's great at it too, but it's that idea of like, just go for it. It's not always going to turn out, and you don't have to beat yourself up over it if it doesn't, it's just like,
I think fail harder means also like tack up that dumb one.
Yep.
Like, just be stupid for just a second. Like, everybody can have the smart stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody's got the brief. Anyone can come up with the right answer.
Yeah.
But the wrong one is the one that is yours.
Yeah.
Like, male shrimp, that stuff is that's fucked up.
It's pretty messed up.
It's not right.
I know.
But you can't stop talking about it, and you can't stop knowing the name. So I just think that there's something about...
It's always fun to do a camp or any piece of work that you put out there, and you're just like, I don't know, man. this could be...
Right, that's the feeling. You want to have that feeling right there. I don't know, man. I don't know.
And then you're kind of like, now you're like just scanning tweets every day. Just like, do people like it? God, who knows? Do people...
Don't do that, man.
I just drives you crazy. But it's just so funny. I love that. I love that you can still do that. And, and that people still have the guts, clients and agencies to put stuff out that you'll have that's really cool. You may or may not ever hear from it again.
I want to end on this thought that someone had asked you, why would you move from like Europe to California to New York? Like, what's going to take you across the country? And I loved your answer, which was a conversation with David Droga. And I just think it's so important that people know who they're working for whom they're working. Do you get involved in looking at portfolios? Do you do the hiring yourself? What's more important, the book or the person? Assuming, they're decent. Like, how much do you value that sort of?
I think it's the person by a long shot. I think it's there's great, you can go to a really good agency and have a really awful creative director, and that's not going to do you any favors. Mm-hmm. And you can go to an agency that is, people say, oh, it's not a great creative agency, but there's tons of creative. There might be a creative director there that's incredible. That's taking a job there, and you just need to work for a person who's going to champion you, and their job is to make you better. Like any good creative director, that's their job, to make your work better and you better. Because if you do horrible work, they're going to look horrible too.
Oh, that's a good point.
So it's, but David was, he was like, come here, work on this tough piece of business, and I got your back the whole way. And it's just like, that's all you need to say. Because there are people that, will kind of distance themselves when the work is not going great. And that's just not, as a creative director, you need to 100% own it as much as everybody else who's working on it. Because if it's kind of a nasty thing to do, I think, is to kind of let people hang when it's not working out. But
that's cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me back for the third time. I can't believe it.
Did you listen to one of the other ones?
No, I meant to last time.
Yeah, no, I didn't do it either. I didn't want to go back. Okay, listeners, if you want to reach Don, you can do so. You can use electronic mail at donaldshelford@mac.com, or it's maybe even easier just to go to his website, which is donshelford.com. You can reach me, as always, at danspodcast@mac.com. Make sure you like the Facebook page. which is facebook.com/DGMS podcast. You can also follow me on Twitter at Dan Balser, and you can send me an email at danspodcast@mac.com. I think I might have said that twice. If so, it's my own problem. It's late on a Friday. And I also realized that this is always the last thing of the week that I do before sitting in traffic. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Don, I hope you have an easy trip back to New York. It's always great catching up with you. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me down. Thanks for having me on your podcast again. It's great.
And listeners, thank you for listening. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Until then, bye.